Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week. I am very excited for today's guest. I'm excited for all our guests, but today's guest, I'm really excited for because he's such a cool dude. You may have seen him on Jimmy Kimmel Live, on Justified, How I Met Your Mother, Frank TV, Campus Ladies, Gilmore Girls, or about a million commercials. He is an actor and a musician and many other things, including a dog wrangler. Please welcome my friend Ted Cannon.
Hi.
Did that sound like a reasonable
It sounded over reasonable. I feel like because of my Instagram auto tune songs, people have pegged me as more of a capable and competent musician than I am or ever have been.
but I
So
mean you play a guitar, do you not?
I
Huh?
listen. There are many things I can do at a poor to medium level quality, and that is one of them. So if you put me on stage at an open mic night, people would be very sad about
Oh,
that
well,
event.
I'm so glad
Oh
you wanted I'm so glad you mentioned
no, this has gone badly already.
we have,
Oh
we
no.
have an open mic schedule
Okay,
that we want to get you on.
too
Uh,
bad there's no way out of that.
it's tonight.
Oh,
Ted, Ted, let's get down to brass tacks.
okay, seriously.
I believe you hail from the great Northeast of these United States. Am I right about this?
Yeah, I am from Boston, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston,
No
because
one would know because you do not talk with
the Boston accent.
the Boston accent.
So I do not. I have never thought of myself as having a Boston accent. There was one time, I forget where I was, and some guy looked at me and goes, "Whoa, you have the strongest Boston accent I have ever heard." I was like, I, I, I don't.
I
And
beg
so
to
I'm not sure
differ,
what that
sir.
man was thinking. Um, I don't feel like I have any accent. I feel like people think I'm always from the Midwest. Uh,
It's weird. I grew up in Wisconsin and I
mhm.
got rid of my accent by accident in college, I think, by doing plays and whatever maybe. But every once in a while someone will say like, oh man, that was so Wisconsin what you just said. And I'm like, I don't know. I think you just found out I'm from Wisconsin. You've decided that that's what you hear.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense because isn't it Scanson? Like, I've never heard you say that.
Yeah, Wisconsin. Yeah, it's a little bit of that. But people conflate Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Chicago actually.
Yeah,
Times.
I'm not entirely innocent of doing that myself.
Have you in your acting travels done dialect, like taken dialect classes or studied dialects?
I don't think I've ever. Well, I mean, no, I don't think so. I've definitely been like, oh, this audition is asking for this accent. Let me go see what I can find to try and match it. And there's a few accents that I can do pretty passably. So when I have voiceover auditions, I'll sometimes throw them on. Boston is one that I feel like I can pretty competently throw on. Um, but I don't think I've ever gone through a full-on training. I mean, in the course of Impro, you do a little dialect for Jane specifically, and but no. Do you have any suggestions?
Ted refers to Jane Austen Unscripted from Impro
Sorry.
in Los Angeles. When we do some of the shows that we do, like Jane Austen, for example, or Tennessee Williams, we'll work a little bit on the dialect that would be appropriate for the genre. Um, but yeah, I think that the issue with especially with commercials and voiceovers is that I will hear often I'll say, yeah, I can do a passable accent of this or that. And then someone will typically look at me with their, eyebrow raised and say like, yeah, but you're going to be competing with people who are from New Zealand. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well then no.
Yeah. No. I think it's the difference between like, oh, this is a big, broad character, and you can do like a sort of vaguely European kind of accent because it's silly, and they're like, oh yeah, great. As opposed to like, yes, I sound very convincing as a German man.
speaking of passively
Oh,
and
I thought we were speaking of German men, and I was
speaking of
curious which
passively
one
and
you were.
vaguely European, uh, uh, I did a voice on a game on the English language version of a game, and I many years later, I decided to see if I could find like a piece of that video. Because the video is embedded in the game, and
Uh-huh.
unless you play the game, you're not going to see it. But somebody had lifted pieces and put them on the web to critique how how ill defined my dialect was.
You specifically, not just the game in general, but
Me,
you, oh, wow.
like said, like I don't know what is this guy, what is the English voice of this character think he's doing with this style? And I was like, I was doing what the director told me to do. The director
Hmm.
directed me to do exactly what you hear. So
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that kind of critique. That makes me think of there was a time when I would find um, some of my commercials on YouTube and like scroll through the comments and screenshot some of the worst things that people had to say.
really,
There's probably I have a folder somewhere of all the nasty things that people had to say before it was like kind of in vogue to read the mean tweets about you. I was saving my mean YouTube comments, which I wish I could
wow.
remember right now. But the only thing I could remember was someone was like, "Oh, blah blah blah, Hitler's grandson," and I was like, "Oh, that feels unnecessary." I'm like, not even that German.
But you do have some German ancestry, so you are partially responsible.
I mean, I guess so. That's like I'd have to. Oh well, let's see.
Have you
I
done
think
those 23andMe and that sort of thing?
no. I know like my grandmother, her parents moved here from Finland just before she was born, so I know that I'm like 25% Finnish. That's like my biggest chunk. Although my other side is like
You
super
do.
old American.
You have a Scandinavian vibe about
I
you.
think yeah, Scandinavian, sure. That's where I feel like that's what when they're looking for nativities, nationalities, Scandinavian is what they put on this guy.
Yeah.
So that, I'm sure I have some German. It's not one of my top like few, and I haven't done the 23andMe to figure it all out because I'm afraid that they will
I I
sell
am
all the.
too. People are so casual about turning over their DNA, and I'm like, I don't think I want to do that.
No, especially when you turn around every other time and Amazon's like, oh, we bought this, we're buying this medical company. Oh, we're buying Roomba. Oh, we own Ring cameras now. It's just like, well, you have enough info. Let's keep
Did
some to
Amazon buy
ourselves.
Ring, by the way?
Oh, a while ago, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I used to live near Ring in Santa Monica, near their
Oh,
headquarters when they first started. Um, yeah, Amazon just bought a bunch of medical.
something
Uh,
called One Medical, which
yes,
I don't
yes.
know what that is, whether it's
It's a
urgent care or
startup.
something.
It's like a boutique medical. It's like freelance hiring freelance doctors, but not actually being a hospital.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it does not seem like a good idea, and I don't. It's one of those things I'd be very curious to know, but all the fine print seems to be like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't seem right. You're going to get a lot of angry letters from all of your
From
DNA testing
the genetic
audience
testing
members.
fans.
Very curious.
Uh, yeah, I did hear recently that there is, or there are places where you can get it like a limited amount. Do you know what I'm talking about? That you can get sort of like a limited screen.
Well, I think, I mean, it started the difference between 23andMe and other stuff is 23andMe is just sort of a consumer thing. Like you could go to a doctor and get genetic screening, and that's a lot more involved and comprehensive, which I think is still probably very expensive. Um, there was well, this is going to be off topic. I like to read a lot of nonfiction science type books, and I read this one called "She Has Her Mother's Laugh," which is all about heredity. It's by Carl Zimmer, and one part of it he talks about going in there and getting his sort of like DNA testing in there because it was I guess it must have been before the 23andMe stuff was really taken off. Anywho, so I don't know if there's like a consumer limited version, but
Yeah.
that would be more appealing.
Carl Zimmer. I know his name, but I am afraid I don't know his.
He's written a bunch of books. He's a science journalist at the New York Times now, I think. But
That's
he's written a bunch of really awesome, sort of easy to absorb popular science books about parasites and
Oh,
about
I think I have
evolution.
read. I think I have read a couple of his books because I've read Parasite Rex.
That was fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what's on your bookshelf right now, or in your virtual?
I am, let's see, I just, I have an audiobook that I listen to on a walk with the dog, and I have a Kindle book that I'm reading. So I just finished Erebus, which was by Michael Palin. in his secondary career as a historian and science man
World
about the
travel logger.
yeah. So this is about the ship, the Erebus, which is well known with the Terror, the sort of counterpart. They were looking for the Northwest Passage and then they sank. But it had a long and storied history before that. So I just finished that, and I was like, oh, I'm going to keep in this vein. So now I'm listening to is it called South? The Ernest Shackleton memoir
Yes,
about going to the
yes.
South, failing to get to the
I've
South
given
Pole.
that book as gifts a few times.
Oh, so I have a paperback of that and I'm listening to the audiobook. And so I sort of like, I'm like hoping that there's maps and flipping through the pictures. And then I just started reading this, I guess it's a fantasy novel someone recommended called Foundry Side, which
Hmm.
I guess I'm about halfway through it. It's so hard with the Kindle. You just sort of feel like you're reading and then it stops. As opposed to being like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm in this satisfying section of the book.
yeah, because it says location 6,384, and you're like, I don't know what that means.
Yep. But it's also very entertaining. So that's what I'm reading right now. I always like to try and keep a fiction and a nonfiction going.
If this was the late 1700s, would you have one of those Thomas Jefferson turnstile things with like six books open on it?
Oh,
You just turn to the next book and then turn.
I guess so. There's a limit. I feel like I maybe have a 3 book limit that I'll work on at the same time. Because I think sometimes I'll have a fiction, a nonfiction, and an audiobook. Because if you're doing drives to auditions, when I drive carpool for my daughter, it's like a long drive, and I'll throw on the audiobook then. But I don't think I could go past 3. So no, I think he could keep his book carousel to himself.
Carousel was the word I couldn't think of. Thank you very much.
Hey,
I, I referred to it as a thing, which
yeah, it's a
is
team effort.
reasonably accurate. Um, the 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 conundrum that I have is podcasts, both produced by like friends or acquaintances or people I'm a fan of, and like slicker, more professionally, I guess, for lack of a better word, produced podcasts, such as it is, versus audiobooks, versus TV episodes and things like that. How do you manage that? How do you manage the balance between those?
I have not listened to a podcast in a little bit. I have like a huge backlog. And what happened, I think, was because podcasts are great mostly for driving to auditions, because it's usually like half an hour there, half an hour back, an hour there, an hour back, something like that. And the podcasts, like they slot in very nicely. Whereas with an audiobook, you're sort of like, oh, wait, where was I? And you sort of start and stop. But then with all the COVID stuff and staying home and auditioning from home, I did a lot less of that modular driving. So I had the huge podcast backlog. So now I'm just sort of onto the audiobooks. And so I basically like that's how I do the audiobooks. And I don't listen to podcasts other time because I can't focus on them.
Yeah.
And then TV, that's just like an evening activity to
Yeah.
try and catch up with 1 or 2 episodes before my wife falls asleep.
Do you have a show or shows that you're
Let's see.
experiencing?
We have 1 episode left of The Bear, which I think we both really liked.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, what was the last thing we loved?
Or should I say, yes, chef?
You should say yes, chef. I'm excited to try out The Rehearsal. I really loved what's this?
I
How
did.
to?
Yeah,
Did you watch that one?
I didn't. I
Mm.
didn't. But
Uh,
but I'm curious.
I'm curious because I really loved How to with John Wilson, which I don't know if you watched that.
I didn't watch that, but I mean I know what it is, but
Yeah, the first season of that especially was just amazing. So I'm very intrigued to see this, but my wife didn't like Nathan For You, so I'm not sure where this sits in the spectrum between Nathan For You and How to with John Wilson. So we'll see if it's a success or
well,
not.
I did hear that it was sort of Nathan Few on steroids even. So
Well, maybe not. Maybe that's going to be a solo watch
have
then.
you seen clips?
No, I just like sort of. I even not entirely sure I know the idea of it. I just like the
It's
tidbits of the idea of it sounded intriguing enough that I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna give this a
I
shot.
mean it's a box within a box within a box. It is so meta, and like I guess whatever the drug that you would put an awkward person on to make them more awkward. Um, I won't use the word steroids because that's sort of overused, but yeah, it's just yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I can do it.
Well, we'll find out, and if not, I'll I'll send you clips of the best episodes then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
would actually, that's the thing. There's so many shows that you, as a person who's a fan of something that you're watching, you're like, well, I want to be a completist. I want to watch all the episodes. But as a sort of a consumer with a limited amount of time, I kind of want people to say, like, all right, well, this show made 72 episodes. 40 of them are great. So you can skip. I want someone to make like lists that tell
I'm
me what I can skip.
I'm not I would be surprised if there are not lists like that, especially for some of the like hotter shows that people love and don't love. Like there's probably out there a catalog of lost episodes that you can just skip and still enjoy. Well, that's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
We don't need to go into that. Um, yeah, I actually was thinking about that with the Ernest Shackleton book because it's really enjoyable. But then he's also like, we did a sounding and it was this deep, and we went on this far on the ice flow, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but like you're telling these things in like this very cut and dry tone, and you're like, well, this guy had frostbite all over his feet, and we had to snuggle all night because we were all so freezing. And I'm like, well, maybe, I mean, if you're just going to give me that kind of detail, maybe you could just sort of summarize and move along
Yeah.
a little bit. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, this is a
The paperback is like that
oh
fat.
yeah, it's a 14-hour audiobook or something.
Yeah.
It's a lot of dog walks in there, which she needs a lot, so that's fine.
How old is this dog?
She's about 7 months. She's a
Yeah.
new addition.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's still a puppy, but she's not as crazy a puppy as she was. She's already mellowed out a little bit, maybe with teething, but she's still an awful lot compared to our old dog who was 17 when we had to put him to sleep. So it's like a very different
It's a different experience.
experience. Yeah.
But does she wake up in the middle of the night and demand going out or anything?
No, that's from the get go. She's been amazing about that. She sleeps through the night from the beginning, which I don't know how that happened, but it's
Wow,
fantastic.
you are all very lucky.
Yeah.
Um, so when you were growing up there in Boston, did you start doing theatery type of stuff at a youthful age? What, but the Zoom,
Yep. The cropping is not right, but she is now right. She heard me disparaging her, and she has come up and is trying to bite me. Hi. Um, yeah, so let's see. Yes, I did. I did all of my. We belonged to a Unitarian church starting in when I was in fifth grade, and they had a big. I don't know if it was yearly or twice a year musical. So I started doing those in fifth grade. Um, that was a lot of fun, and I then went through high school and did music, and I was the vice president of the performing arts company. I don't know if you knew that. It's
wow,
kind of a big deal.
that is impressive, an executive position.
Well, I was the only. Let's see. I think I was it for junior and senior year, and I was the only junior that was chosen, and all the rest were seniors. So I think that gives you a little bit of a sense of how kind of impressive that was.
You had a status right there.
Little cachet. So I did plays and musicals there. Then I went to college, and I didn't want to be a theater major because I have issues with a lot of theater people. I love I love the theater. I love performing. I find a lot of times I don't get along very well with a lot of other actor
That's
types.
that Unitarian upbringing. I mean, that's really what it
It's
is.
really just
The
straight.
Unitarians teach you that you really have to be skeptical, and when you see somebody who you just don't like the cut of their jib,
Yeah.
right.
I once referred to myself at a friend asked if a friend's family asked about what church I went to or something, and I referred to myself as a lapsed Unitarian because I thought that was funny, and they didn't think it was funny. They were a lot more religious than that.
Oh boy. Well, it is,
um,
but
I mean, that's a solid joke.
I think I think Unitarians are lapsed Unitarians.
Exactly.
Uh,
That was my point.
so there you are in high school.
Hmm.
I've pulled you back from college
Okay.
for a minute. Um, did you like musicals more than plays? Did you like plays more than musicals? Did you care, or was it just like all fun time?
So Our school was not huge. I feel like it was like 800 people, 600 people, something like that.
I was about the same. Am I?
Yeah. So it's not like there was a ton of options going on. There was like the theater department, which did whatever it did at the time. And I don't remember if we did just like straight plays very often. Like we did, there was something called Drama Fest, which was like, oh, there's the dog. Which was, a festival of short plays, and those we would often do just like dramatic pieces or comic pieces, but just straight plays. Um, can you hear the squeaking, or is
Yeah, but it's
all
great.
right?
I love it personally.
Oh, right, great.
I think it'd be
Uh,
an enjoyable ear candy for our listeners who are wearing headphones.
yeah. So basically, there was one big musical a year, and that was sort of the thing that it worked towards. And other than that, there wasn't a lot going on. Like there must have been like
We just by comparison, we had literally one play and one musical every year at my
we
school.
definitely had one musical every year. I'm not even sure that we had one play because I didn't do just a straight play at, in high school,
Yeah, I mean,
except for the little shorts for the drama fest.
yeah.
Um, but I also that's where I was introduced to improv, where because this was a long time ago. Improv is sort of everywhere and in high school and everything now. It's like it's very common, but at the time it was not. But there was the one rehearsal when we would be working on the play or on the musical, where they would maybe like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the rehearsal process, they would say, "Okay, you know what? I think this is too much now. Here, can you give me that? Can you? Oh no, now you want to fight? No, I don't think I can take it away from her and not have her try and kill me."
Where they start
Where they say, "Okay, you know this show. Let's do these
Oh,
scenes, but you just do it. Just do what you want and go where you want with it." And I was like, "Wait a minute, this is so much fun. This is the best thing I've ever done," which is then what made me want to try and pursue it in college as well. Um, just like that one-off
yeah.
one-off rehearsal, and I was like, "Ooh, I can do this. I like this."
And so you did you even think about going to like a conservatory program? Were you that much in love with acting, or did you have something?
No, I mean, yes. So I was in love with acting, and I knew. Let's see. The first thing I told my mom I wanted to do as a job was I wanted to be a singer on the radio and a map maker on the moon. That was my career choice. And then I don't remember exactly when it shifted, but shortly after that, I was like, oh, I want to be an actor. So I knew I would try and come to Los Angeles and be an actor. But I was always a little like, well, you should have a backup, have another option in your pants just in case this doesn't work out. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'll go to college and I'll get a different kind of degree, and then that could be my backup. Um, which so I did not think about going to conservatory. I was like, oh, that feels like too many eggs in the basket. Maybe not all the eggs, but a lot of the eggs. So that was not a consideration. But I did want to go somewhere where I could do theatrical stuff.
But Los Angeles occurred to you before New York did?
Yes, because theater was not my first preference. I would like to be a screen actor,
Oh, I see.
but I think of theatrical meaning the whole gamut of things. But
Sure.
LA was where I wanted. I moved to LA right after college. My friend was doing a final year. Now we're jumping ahead, Mike. You're missing. There's
Look,
like,
let's go
there's.
back to college. How did you choose? How did you choose what school to go to?
I wanted to go to a small liberal arts college that didn't have any fraternities or sororities. And
Kenyon.
so, yeah, Kenyon was on my list. My cousin had gone to Kenyon. Actually, they may have fraternities there
I
now.
don't know.
But at any rate, Kenyon was on my list. I was looking at Kenyon, Carleton, Wesleyan. I ended up going to Vassar. Um, for a brief moment, I entertained the idea that I would go to, is it St. John's, the one that's all, it's like all classic literature. And
I don't know. That
for a
sounds
brief second, I think it's in Texas. For a brief second, I was like, oh yeah, that's the kind of thing I want to do. I want to be like a guy who reads lots of books, and I would have been miserable there. So, so I had a very short list. Carleton, Grinnell, Wesleyan, Vassar. I applied to early decision to Vassar and I got in, and then I didn't apply anywhere else. So that was an
Yeah.
easy solution.
Yeah.
Um, and it was great.
Vassar has a bit of uh, I have the impression from friends in New York that Vassar has a very um, strong post grad stay together alumni connection kind of a vibe.
I think that's very true. I have a lot of friends still from college. Um, I think that's a lot stronger in New York because Vassar's in Poughkeepsie, New York, so it's just sort of just up the river from New York, New York, and a lot of people end up there. Some people come out here. I have some of my closest friends are still friends from college who are still living out here, and I know a lot of people are still in touch and still in contact um, from their Vassar connection.
Yeah, it was always so weird for me to hear people talk about like, oh well, we know each other from Vassar, we know each other from whatever Smith or whatever college or something like that. Because I'd be like, well, I went to the University of Wisconsin with 50,000 other people, so
Yeah.
not really in touch with them.
You're not going to the reunion and being like, "Oh, I know all of
Oh
you
my
people."
God, hey!
Like I still felt like my class, we get the yearbook at the end. I was like, there's like a lot of people in here I don't know, and there weren't even that many. I feel like Vassar had like 2,600 people when I went there,
Yeah.
so I can't even imagine how few people you would know in that greater context.
Did you major in theater? What was your?
No, Mike, I just told you I needed to have a fallback. Okay, I needed
Oh,
to have
excuse
a
me. Yeah,
backup job.
right.
So I was a psychology major.
Oh, psych.
hmm which I really enjoyed and I'd always been interested in and have never done anything with. And everyone's like, "Oh, well, you're an actor, so that's psychology." And I'm like, "I don't think so. Like, I'm
Same.
not. I'm not going to the DSM, whichever version they're on now, and flipping
Five.
through to find. Are they on five?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they were on four when I was in college. That's not too many
Oh,
advances in
they don't
DSMs.
update it for.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I assumed they'd be on at least six. Um, but no. So but while I was there, I did do a lot of I did a lot of student films. I joined, there was only one improv group there at the time, which has since expanded. They've got all kinds of, even within the next couple of years after I left, they have a whole raft of improv groups. I did did I do any plays? I did plays after college, like a couple of little things in New York when I briefly lived there. Um, but mostly I loved improv and I really liked doing people student films. Um, and then playing in my rock and roll band. I guess that gives me a tiny bit of musician credit
Hold on a
because
minute. You were in a rock and roll band.
I was in a rock and roll band where I would play guitar and sing songs, and it was a lot of fun.
Who were your band's big influences? What's a touchstone that people would say, oh yeah, okay.
I'm not sure because the bands that I love, I don't think we necessarily sounded like them because, as I mentioned, I'm not a very good musician. So in college, I was at the tail end of being really into Smashing Pumpkins, and I was really into what was becoming the emo scene, which has since become something that is unrecognizable to me. But I was really into bands like the Get Up Kids and the Promise Ring and Sunny Day Real Estate and Mineral and all these sorts of. I think they're the first. So I guess emo sort of came out of post-punk, hardcore, and I think the first ones are sort of like Fugazi and like some harder ones, and then it gets a little poppier, and that's where I sort of step on, and then it gets a little whinier, and that's sort of where I step off, and then for some reason emo is goth now. Um, yeah, so I think we were very much a pop band. I think probably people would have said Weezer, but I don't think we were certainly not as good as Weezer, which may surprise you to hear. Um, but we were definitely just like, this is a rock and roll song. I'm gonna sing about a girls or being sad or something like that, and
Yeah,
I'll play my guitar and I'll hit the distortion pedal sometimes.
nicely done.
Yeah.
Uh, when did you live in New York?
I don't remember when I moved there, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna leave. My birthday is September 28th, and I was like, I'm gonna leave on my birthday in 2001.
Oh,
So
God. Wow.
So it was the strangest time to live in New York.
Did
Um,
you do improv when you lived there?
yes, I did at, what was it called? Monster Improv? Godzilla something. It was like it was Second City. Was it Second City in New York? Maybe it was above Monster Sushi. It was like it was I had taken, so I graduated, I moved out here briefly with my friend, and I had just started dating my wife, who was not my wife then, but is now my wife. So I guess she's my girlfriend then. And she was still in school. And so I moved to LA and I took basic at Groundlings. And then I was like, actually, I don't like LA. I want to live in New York. But basic, I just wanted to go back because my girlfriend was there. So
Oh,
I moved then to New York. And this was the place that was like, yeah, yeah, if you took a class at Groundlings, you can take our second level here instead of starting at the beginning. I was like, great, let's do that. Um, but it was sort of like, I think I just took two classes there and I was like, I'm not really enjoying this. So I wasn't a ton of it. And then I did a couple of little plays that friends were like, hey, I'm doing this play. Do you want to be in it? And I was like, sure.
nice.
Um, but I was not in New York very long. It was not the place for me. I'm
Yeah.
a suburban kid, and Los Angeles has many suburbs, which is part of why I feel relaxed here. New York, I was shopping in the grocery store with a little cart like this, and then I'd have to carry it on the subway and had to take my Christmas tree on the subway. And I just was like, oh, this doesn't work for me. I like a big wide aisle, and I push the cart and I take a lot of bags and I put them in my car.
Yeah.
I'm sort of revising that opinion. I think in my later years, I would like some more public transit options, but it's, we can tackle that in 10, 15 years. See where I'm at.
Uh, well, but I mean, it's nice that you gave it a shot, that you went to New York because you had, and it it worked out chasing your wife, your then girlfriend.
It did, and I had a great job. I worked at Martha Stewart Living when I was there. They used to have a magazine, and I worked on that magazine doing my design production. And I could
Cool.
go and do my theatrical stuff. I briefly, very briefly, worked as a art, let's see, a production assistant, like an art design assistant. So not a PA, but like I was friends with someone who was a production designer, and he was like, "Oh, hey, will you be my assistant in the city?" And I was like, "Great!" So one summer, I like tootled around the city and went to all the prop houses and went to NBC and like up in the big fancy building and had a meeting with someone, and they were like, "We already knew all this stuff," and I was like, "I'm new to this job." I had a very early 20s New York experience, I guess.
Yeah, that's great.
I hadn't thought about that in a while.
You haven't thought about having done that?
That very brief art director assistant job.
Yeah. We I like the response. We already know all this stuff.
Yeah, I was like, okay, well, good. I went and took pictures of things with my Polaroid camera. Okay, sorry, it wasn't good.
Sorry, it wasn't what you expected me to have done. Um, when you got back to Los Angeles, did you kind of hit the ground running because you'd already been there briefly for a minute, and then
Yeah, I mean, it never feels like you're running as fast as you could or should be. But I came back and I went back into the Groundlings program, which I loved and met a lot of great people through that. Went through that. I was in the Sunday company over there for a year, um, and I went then after that and did stuff at UCB, and then started doing stuff here and there, sort of around, just sort of catch as catch can. Oh, here we're doing this. I'm doing this show. You want to come do it? And then started at Impro, and I feel like I found my home. There's so much. I feel like, so I'm certainly not an improv like original generation, like studied with Del Close or whatever. Like I'm solidly past that. But I think I'm like the tail end of when improv was kind of its own thing. Like that they would call people auditions and they would say, okay, we want improv people for this one. Whereas now everybody says they're an improv person. Everyone's taking a class. Everyone's like, oh, I'm great at improv, all this stuff. And so, why was I saying that? Oh, just that now so many people do improv because they want to be seen to do something else. And it's
yeah,
like, sure, see me, have me do something else, that's great. But I actually want to just do improv because I really love doing improv. And I find it very gratifying. And if it never, leads to me being the star of a TV show, that is fine. I will be happy as long as I can keep doing it. And so many places that I would go to, they, a lot of them felt very, people were very self-centered and very like, look at me, and it, in a way that I don't find at Impro at all, where it's all very collaborative in the way that I think improv is always supposed to be collaborative. Um, and so that's my very long way of saying that I found the place where I've really enjoyed doing improv.
Terrific.
Thanks.
That's a great. I like that assessment. When you're improvising, how do you find your way around a moment that is sticky or not connecting, or do you have you developed tactics or skills, or do you just kind of pull the ripcord and get out, or is there anything that you kind of lean on for getting past a difficult moment?
I think yes, and I think I've been doing it long enough that it's changed. So when I started doing improv, I I don't know whether it was just where my brain was developmentally, but I could just talk a mile a minute. I could just this all makes sense. I'm all over the place. And so when I'd get to a sticky situation, I would just talk and I could just like churn it all out and turn it all out and then be like, oh, I hit something, great. And then maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I started noticing I would start a sentence in the way that I used to, and it would always sort of lead to a resolution. But instead, at about 3/4 of the way through sentence, my brain would go, What were you going to say?" I'd say, "Oh, I'm not sure. Usually you tell me." And they say, "Oh no, no, this time you got to know what you're saying." And so if you're improvising and you're this guy who knows everything and starts talking and then you stop, that's real weird. And so I was like, "Oh, like I need to adjust because this happens now. And sometimes I can't find the word, which is something that had never used to happen to me." And so now my tactic, I think, is what it should have been to begin with, which is to just live in the scene and realize that if you're having a tough time in life, that very often you just sit there and you don't say anything until you know what you want to say or you have something to say. And so now I know, oh, my former go-to was to just like blast through something until we got to something that I could tie something to and move on from. And now I know that I can use that as a tactic, but I also know that, oh, hey, I can just sit back, let the world pass me by. And in the same way that the stream of words coming from me might lead me to an anchor that I can tie to, the world passing by, my partners in the scene, the environment around us, like any of that stuff, something will come out to me. I don't have to generate that thing every time. And sometimes it can just come to you. So my newer tactic is to just be okay with it being sticky, because sometimes things are sticky. And when something comes to unstick it, pick it up and move along.
This is one of the top most difficult and challenging things as a director or teacher, to get improvisers to understand. It is absolutely. I mean, there are a very small number of things that I would say are like the concepts that just seem to it just seems to require years of experience to realize.
I feel like it's not the same as, but it's of a piece with that whole like acting is just getting out of your own way. Like you're like, oh, I'm supposed to be this, and so I'm gonna be this. I'm a mechanic, so mechanics talk like this, and the tough guys, and whatever. And it's like, well, if you're playing the mechanic, they want you to be the mechanic, and the hardest thing to do is to just be what you would be in that situation. Like it's so much easier to put on a mask or a facade or something, rather than be like, oh, hey, this is me, this is what I really think and would really do. Please don't judge me. The dog is licking my foot and it's really gross. um, that's not
This
that's
is
not an improv metaphor.
You're being you while the dog is licking your foot.
That's what you have to do. You have to be you while the dog's licking your foot and the cameras are on and the lights are on. And yeah, Can you be you? But yeah, it's really hard, and I'm not surprised that that's one of the hardest things you find. It's like, I forget who said, it's like trust that you are enough. Like, it, no one thinks they're enough. Like, I'm not I'm not funny enough. I have to try and figure out something to do or put on a, oh, stop it. Um, and and the only thing you can be that no one else can be is yourself. And I think because we're so used to being ourself, it's boring. But in a context on stage, you being yourself, the audience, it's interesting. The audience doesn't know you well enough to be bored with you. Like, no one knows you as well as you do, and no one is bored of you in the same way that you are bored of
Right.
yourself.
Right. No one is with you 24/7 like you are. Uh, and plus the you that you are on stage with another actor or another improviser who is being the they that they are is a different uh, chemistry tonight than it will be tomorrow night or the next night, etc.
Yeah. And I think it's also great once you sort of are able to feel comfortable. Like, this has sort of been my many years process, which I realized, I'm trying to think how to best say this. What you There are things that can be crutches that can then become tools. I mean, crutches are tools, but if you use them all the time, then it's not as good. But if you say, oh, this scene, I want to use this crutch, and you very consciously choose that, that's awesome. So once you've figured out, okay, this is me being the me that I am, and then you think, oh, well, this is the me being the me who I am, who's actually a little bit meaner, or who's actually a little bit slow, or a little bit southern, or a little bit whatever, and you can choose to put those things on rather than feel like you need to have those things on to perform in the first place. So like I had an experience with Joe McGinley. Um,
Bay Area
maybe
theater sports and Impro Los Angeles teacher and performer and
everything. I
and
mean,
everything.
marvelous, wonderful human being. Where I think it was during, we did a fairy tale run, and I did a character which I was like, oh, this is like one of my go-tos. Why am I doing this thing? And she was like, that was so funny. I've never seen you do something as funny as that. Like, I didn't realize that, you know, that you could be, not that you could be funny, but like that funny in this big broad way. And I was like, that's all I do. Because I'm remembering my time at Groundlings, where like that, the thing that I was doing was sort of like my stock and trade. And I was like, well, I did that for so long, and I came here and I sort of like worked on getting rid of that. But then it was like, oh, well, now it's time to sort of put that layer back on. And that was so refreshing, because like you're saying, it's so hard to convince people, you're enough, do be you, just be you, be you. That that then once you've accomplished that, or maybe mostly accomplished that, you then can add more stuff to it. You don't need to throw away the stuff that you used to do. You just need to recognize when it's the right weather for that outfit.
I love that.
There we go. This is what I discover in therapy, as I always come up with a very um, stupid analogy that I'm just like, well, this is what I'm rolling with today. So the right weather for the outfit
I,
is what we're happening.
I would not. I would the right out for the weather. I would not say that that's stupid. I would say that that's deft.
That one felt
Uh,
all right. Sometimes they're pretty stupid.
I it's being judicious enough to know when this thing that you maybe used to lean on perhaps too often is now available not only available to you but useful to you,
Yeah,
and not uh, an overly self-conscious distraction, but in fact um, a very useful tool that fits.
yeah,
Um, I think that there is a we're always in acting striking this balance between revealing and concealing and vulnerability versus armor or Teflon and it's no different when you're trying to improvise a narrative that's has some verisimilitude to it. Like you want I guess not to denigrate improv that's um, sort of more fast and furious and jokey, but because that is an art form and has its place. But when you're sort of in earnest trying to both honor a playwright and honor the alchemy of a group of people who are discovering the story together, um, being who you are is probably the best thing that you can bring um, to that discovery. Maybe you walk in with a pickaxe today, but maybe you could do well with a dental tool instead. Uh, and so there's this, I don't know, there's sometimes a convincing that has to happen when you're directing or when you're teaching of we're all in the mind together. We're all scratching at the sides and at the front, and we're all going to try to find things together. So no one needs to pull out the dynamite necessarily.
Yeah.
uh yeah, the right tool for the job, the right clothes
And
for the
it,
weather.
but it's also like you never, I don't think you will ever feel 100% comfortable that you've made the right choice. Like, oh, this is what it seems like it's being called for from me. Is this right? Should I not have put on this layer that I did? Like, I don't think anyone ever gets to the point where they're completely comfortable with all their choices and feeling like they've made the right choice, and they're like, "Yep, great, that worked out exactly as it should have," and I have no notes for myself.
Would that be your advice to uh an improv maybe a less experienced improviser or a person who's sort of on their journey? Don't
Which
count on being comfortable with your choices.
I I guess so. I mean, no, maybe I don't want to tell them that because I feel like it's too terrifying to feel like, wait, you never get to the point where you're like 100%. I think um I can't remember whose quote it was. Is either my one of my old teachers at Groundlings or someone that they were referring to, that they, I think it was acting in general, but I think it's great on stage where it's joyfully struggling. So it's all about how you respond to that. So if you are stuck and things aren't going right and you freeze and you're uncomfortable, uh, the audience gets uncomfortable too. If things aren't going right and you're stuck and you go, oh, okay, we're stuck here, and you don't get winky to the audience and jokey and whatever, but you just sort of like are just like, well, this is what happens. This is like what I've come to expect. Then I think you have a great time, even when you have a bad time. So I don't know how I got there from the first thought, but we'll just pretend that that's a really linear thought and that people should just be joyfully struggling on
Yeah,
stage.
I like that. I like that concept, because if the instant you think you have it all figured out, you know, that's there's there's dragons there.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, the alchemy of other people too. It's like maybe best case scenario, you have it figured out for you or you and one other person. There's like someone you work with all the time and you've got it figured out. You guys are locked in. You do not have it figured out with anyone beyond that person or beyond yourself or that person on a bad day or just, yeah. So you have to be comfortable with it not going well.
Yeah, that is another one of those pillars of that are difficult to convey is being comfortable with uncertainty and being happy to I don't know, it's like driving in a blizzard or something like that.
And it's so ironic because I think everyone feels that way, but it's like it's improv. Like the whole point of it is its uncertainty. Like if you wanted to know exactly where things are going, this is not the thing you should be doing. Like
there's a there's a there are other art forms that involve much more calculation.
yeah, or even like knowing what that person thinks of you or what you're supposed to say to them. Like I think a lot of people think of improv as just like, making up jokes as you go along. And I mean, I guess if so, there, yeah, okay. So to them, improv is successfully making the audience laugh by coming up with something right then. I was like, all right, yeah, I could see that. But that's looking at like the result versus the process. Um, and I think, I don't know, that just seemed like it flicked a switch in my head where it seems like when you get comfortable with the process is when you start to think that you're enough. Uh, but this is a new thought to me, so we might have to pause the tape for like a couple minutes. Let me process it. We'll come back to it. Um, like those seem related. If you're being results oriented, you think, oh, I have to do this to get to this. And
Sure.
when you're being process oriented, you're just like, this is me doing this thing,
That is
and people
exactly
enjoy
it.
it.
That is exactly it.
I'm
Right.
glad we had that brief pause.
Didn't I didn't have to stop the tape. I am recording this on tape. So
Yes, I've seen your setup. It's very jury rigged, getting all the cables out of your computer
very
into the
old.
VCR.
Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, that is precisely it. Is that the process is enough, the discovery is enough. The audience is actually watching a show on top of it, thinly layered on top of another show. One is the story that's being told. One is watching the storytellers come up with it, and discover it together, and they're in on it, and that's when it's great. That's when it's really fun and risky and challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's why the joyful part of the joyful struggle is what works, because the the audience never thinks you know what you're doing. Like that's part of the contract that you guys have. You're making this up. And if you're making this up and it's going badly and you're upset about it, the audience feels uncomfortable. If you're making this up and it's going badly, because sometimes that's what happens and you're just making it up and that's part of the contract, and you can struggle joyfully, then the audience, I think, feels a lot more comfortable and is happy to be there, even if it's not a perfect show.
Yeah, I think in that case, the audience feels like you still know what you're doing, but on a different level. So they feel sort of taken care of in
Hmm.
terms of the the uh, the tone of the room, and the fact that they've bought a ticket, et cetera. Right? They feel sort of like, well, the show is falling apart, but the performers are having a great time, without being obnoxious about it, and they're including us in the fact that the show is falling apart, and I'm still entertained, and
Yeah.
etc.
I mean, I think that's, they didn't go to see, in the same way you didn't perform a play, they didn't go to see a play. They came to see improv. If they wanted to see a perfect, exactly executed, intricate story that resolves itself perfectly every time, that's a different thing to go see. And if it comes close to that or approximate that, it's fantastic and it feels great for everybody. But it can still be enjoyable if it's not pulling all that stuff off too.
Yeah. uh how has the pandemic treated you, Ted?
Oh, it's been so awesome. It's like it's so fun and like get to do all the stuff I want to do. um, um, I don't know. It's so funny because I keep talking. I haven't actually. Thankfully, this conversation is happening less frequently now. It's more just like normal conversations with masks or outside, as opposed to I had this conversation a number of times where it was like the pandemic applied the same forces to everyone, but everyone's experience of it was different.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not rising tide lifts all boats. It's like water comes in. Some people are in boats. Some people's first floor of their house flooded. Some people were on a mountain and it's not a big deal. So like I have a wife and two kids, and it was intense to not have any time to myself. And then there were people who were living alone and they were just like, I'd never see anybody. So that is weird.
Yeah.
I definitely like being alone a lot. So I it, I was disappointed and not sad to not be able to see friends and do a lot of things, but I also like I do enjoy just like watching a movie and reading a book and playing a video game, and so that part of it was okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like
We all had pandemic experiences.
we did. Some of them were different. They were all
Yeah.
different, and they
Yeah.
were mostly not what we would want them to be. But yeah, we haven't gotten sick. We haven't gotten COVID yet somehow. Um, I keep saying I feel like there's the book All Quiet on the Western Front, which I vaguely remember from high school. Basically, the thrust being the headline of the day is All Quiet on the Western Front when this soldier dies, which is, I'm not even sure if I'm remembering correctly, but that's my takeaway from that book. And that's how I'm expecting when we will get COVID, is the day when they're like, yeah, COVID's not a big deal anymore. Everyone's totally fine. So,
Just compared your family's COVID experience to a World War One book.
yep, yep, that's what I do. Just draw bad analogies.
Uh, well, I'm glad that you haven't. I'm glad that you haven't gotten sick, and it's entirely possible that you won't, because I mean, the latest things that I was hearing, I simultaneously on the same day I heard there's a new unrelated virus about to spread around the world.
Wait, separate from monkeypox?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
brother.
And then and on the same day I heard like, oh yeah, the new vaccine that's coming out is gonna suddenly render, COVID to be like the regular seasonal flu. So, blah blah blah.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like, go back and read. Is it David Quammen?
yeah. Spillover.
Yeah, Spillover.
Uh-huh.
Um, you have that rock band experience, so if you wanted to join a band and run away and just do that, you could. Yeah.
I will say, Mike, I have a tape of our songs,
Oh,
which I have never been able to digitize because I never had a tape player. Um,
we could have ended this interview with a song from your band.
someone might have put one of them online. Let me look real quick while we're here. I think one song someone had put online. I feel like someone sent me that before,
And
but including our number one hit,
what was that called?
uh, Premarital. It's
Nice.
all about uh, trying to
In-
have a girlfriend and it being awkward, and you're still a kid, but you're supposed to be a grown up when
oh,
you're 20, 19, 20.
I was growing up when I was 19.
Oh,
Um,
good for you, man.
ladies and gentlemen, this has been Ted Cannon, actor, musician, dog parent, parent, uh, and roustabout, really. Um, thanks for doing this, Ted.
Thanks for having me and helping me remember my distant past.
that's the public service I provide.
Yeah,
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening or watching or both. And we'll see you next time. And you can go to tedcannon.com for Ted
that's
Cannon.
true.
Or actually, you should follow him on Instagram. Ted, is your Instagram handle just at Ted Cannon?
It is.
I'll if I'm ambitious enough, I'll do that as a subtitle. But it's TEDCANNON.
And I
And
just found my headphones again. So maybe I'll make up a song on my auto
Ted's
tune.
been auto tuning songs. I mean, spontaneously singing songs through an auto tune app, and it's pretty entertaining.
Thank you.
See you, everybody. Thank you.